Hello, I'm Shelly Kramer. Welcome to the Futurum Tech Webcast. This is part of our interview series of conversations, and today I'm joined by Matt Nolan, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing Decision Sciences for Pega. And today we're going to talk all things CDPs, data analytics, and a new release from Pega. And before we get into that, here's just a little background. CDPs are customer data platforms. They're quickly becoming a must-have tool for organizations. They help manage massive amounts of customer data from a number of different channels and sources. I mean, I know that marketers know this. We have more data coming at us today from more channels than ever before. And managing that data and being able to not only manage it, but use it to get insights that can help deliver better experiences are important. But CDPs, the thing about it is that there's a lot of different kinds of CDPs. There are a lot of different choices. And just having a CDP alone is actually not the holy grail. It's really all about, how can we best use the data that we're able to collect as a result of using our CDP? What do we think about as we're thinking about evaluating our current CDPs, thinking about buying a different kind of CDP, how to use this data, how you can make sure you avoid the common pitfalls? All of those things are what all of those things are what we're talking about today with Matt. Matt, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Shelly. I'm so happy to be on. Honestly, this is fantastic.
Absolutely. Great way to start a day, right?
Absolutely. Oh, I couldn't ask for anything else.
So tell us a little bit, if you would, indulge me and tell us a little bit about your backstory, your career path, how you ended up at Pega, all those interesting things.
I'm a product marketer, so I literally could tell you a half an hour backstory. But if I was going to make it short, so imagine this: my parents set me off 20 or 30 years ago to go get a degree in engineering, right? But the problem is I discovered that I completely disliked engineering, and I wanted to major in something like creative writing, right? So
Right.
my parents wouldn't let me do that, so I ended up with a math degree. And so I did what you do with a math degree. I became a bartender for a while. I became a sports writer for a good long time. And then finally, I met a wonderful woman, asked her to marry me, and she said, I think you're going to need health insurance before I can make that happen. So I got a job at a marketing firm as an analyst. And then from there, I kind of, what happened was the market was really looking for people that could understand data, understand how to turn that data into insights that could be used to help customers. So I ended up going into product management, ultimately product marketing. And that's where I am today with Pega, is I kind of help tell the story. I help clients figure out how are we going to use data to do amazing things with clients every day and have really great kind of in-depth conversations, form some bigger relationships. And that's where I go. That makes sense.
That's awesome. So you know what? Despite any naysayers, you're putting that journey and that math degree to good
My
use.
mother would love to hear that. I still haven't heard that to her. Yet.
I love you. I'm listening to you tell your backstory, and this is why I always ask for this information. I think it's so interesting to hear these little nuances of personal information about people's career journeys. I like to joke that my husband took 8 years to get an undergraduate degree from the University of Kansas because he majored in fun, and he had so much fun that he cycled through 2 complete classes, but he ended up with a comms degree that he's putting to great use in the sales
Self-exploration
field.
is an important part of development, Shelly. I
It
totally understand
is.
where it's coming from.
It is. I have a feeling the two of you would get along incredibly well, Matt. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the marketing industry. So there are lots of changes going on in marketing. There are many changes ahead. And that means that first party data is more important than ever before. You know what's happening, and I know what's happening, and marketers are more than a little stressed. So let's start by talking about what is happening with sharing with our audience. What are these changes ahead that have people so stressed out?
That's a good question. So I'd probably say there's two major things that have changed lately that honestly have kind of guided where a lot of people are going. So first off, a couple of years ago, a lot of organizations talked a lot about customer experience. They talked about digital, but I don't think a lot had really made the shift towards really kind of moving away from more traditional channels and into more digital channels. But then what happened?
Right.
Pandemic happened, right? And so all of a sudden, all these people are inside and they're trying to interact, and there are people that a lot of times folks were out of work, or folks that weren't able to, their incomes kind of changed, their financial situation. So what were they doing? They were calling their banks, and they're calling their insurance companies, calling their healthcare providers and saying, look, I am having a hard time with X, Y, or Z. But the problem is a lot of these organizations weren't ready to handle that kind of digital
Right.
traffic, right?
Right.
And so they found themselves kind of flat-footed when that happened. And about the same time, you started to see pushes from organizations like Google that started making noise about not supporting, third-party
The
cookies.
cookieless future.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden there was a little bit of a panic from a marketing perspective, and they started to look at that. And I think a lot of marketers really started to get the idea, rightfully, that we have this treasure trove of first party information about what people are clicking and doing and seeing, and we're really not putting it to use the way that
Right.
we should. And they've started to make inroads there. And I think that those two things kind of lined up perfectly for the CDP market, if you will. It kind of led to a lot of the creation of that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I think that, my experience from a marketing standpoint, Google was going to make some very massive changes doing away with third-party cookies. That was supposed to happen this year. It's been pushed off to, I think, sometime next year. But what it has done is it's really illuminated the need for marketers to understand. For many, many years, marketers have been relying on those cookies that are just dropped on you when you visit a website and kind of follow you around the web and serve you up ads and that sort of thing. So when you think about the enormity of that going away, all of a sudden marketers are realizing, okay, that easy button, because
Yeah,
that's an easy button,
it really is.
is going away. Now what we have to do is we actually have to think about establishing first party relationships with our customers because we can't rely on the easy button forever.
It's probably fair to
And
say.
so, and so marketers have been ignoring that need for first party data, the need to be able to communicate one to one to their customers, to have a relationship with the customer that doesn't rely on a cookie to bring the customer to you. So that really is why it's so important, and why so many companies, so many organizations are really thinking about how we can get that first party data and how we can maximize that first party data. So it really is kind of a transformative time for
Would
marketers for sure.
would it also be fair to say, I think it wasn't just marketers that have been kind of guilty of that. I think the
Yeah.
vendors in the ecosystem
Yeah.
have also largely ignored first party data for a long time, to the degree that they should have. Like with third party data, they've done a lot to kind of monetize that and to turn that into offerings and services for their customers.
Right.
But that same thing wasn't evident from a first party perspective for a very long time. So I think
Right.
that's marketers aren't the only ones to blame with this.
Oh,
There was a lot there.
absolutely. Well, and we need that first party data feeds marketing, it feeds sales, it feeds R&D, it feeds product development, it feeds customer service, it feeds every part of the organization. So it really is important. And so I have this really annoying habit, tendency rather, of looking for silver linings in challenging times. So when I look at the silver lining that has come out of a global pandemic, is that for a lot of organizations, they put digital transformation initiatives, certain digital transformation initiatives, on the slow path. And what had to happen when we had to immediately pivot to a distributed workforce, largely working from home, from customer challenges, from customers contacting call centers in great numbers at certain times during the pandemic, we had to uh, companies had to find money. They had to really shift quickly and embrace digital transformation. And so what it has done is, I think it's sped up that process. It's helped facilitate a lot of change very quickly. So that's a silver lining. I think for me, the silver lining in thinking about the cookieless future is marketers are doing something, and again, not only marketers, but we're looking at doing something that we haven't really done a good job of, and there's every reason for us to not have ignored this all these
Yeah.
years, right?
We
But we
yeah, I
did ignore it.
100% agree. Yeah, we did, and for a lot of different reasons, and a
Yeah.
lot of existing marketing, like the way it worked, even just a couple years ago, wasn't ready for the amount of data and insight that was
Right.
available in the market. It just wasn't
Right.
able to do that. I think people are
Right.
a little more receptive now.
Yeah.
Operational processes have changed to a certain extent to
Yeah.
allow. I agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about first-party data, why it's so important to maximize that first-party data. So customer experiences and customer interactions are so important. It's no surprise that CDPs have exploded in popularity. So talk a little bit, if you would, about why CDPs are so helpful and how organizations are looking at and thinking about using them.
Sure. So if you look at it from a customer perspective, right, an end customer who's like say visiting your website or going to a like going to your mobile application, to them it should be very easy. Like, hey, I click on X, Y, or Z, I take an action. Why doesn't the brand immediately? Why can't they immediately pivot? But if you really look at kind of what's going on behind the scenes, you have to take that data, you have to convert it and kind of consolidate it and aggregate it, and then you have to map it to your actual identity, and you have to figure
Right.
out what's that mean to me. That process was very, very difficult for most brands until the CDPs kind of became a thing, right? The customer
Yeah.
data platforms. What those CDPs kind of do, if you will, is they start by collecting that information, making it really simple. And then they aggregate it and they do identity management over the top of it, which has always been a huge issue for marketers.
Right.
How do I understand what people are doing and saying and thinking on my
Right.
website or in my other properties? But then they also take it and they curate it and they turn that into some sort of signal, right? Something that means something to me. Like if you're like a lot of different CDPs will turn it into a propensity score or some sort of
Right.
signal that says somebody's interested or a segment. That's real value for a brand, right?
Right.
And then they syndicate it and they make it available. That kind of, if you will, that kind of ecosystem just wasn't available before. So CDPs have kind of filled a need, I think, that the market didn't even know it had,
Right.
until very recently anyway.
But that said, so there's a lot of really cool things that CDPs can do.
Sure.
A CDP alone, just any CDP alone, of course, is not the holy grail. It's not the ultimate solution, but there are a lot of instances where they fall short. Let's talk about those a little bit.
Okay, so fall short. I'll say this: the problem with the CDP market is like you said, it happened very quickly, right? Like we really kind of in the last 2 or 3 years, the CDP market went from 0 to 60, and what happened is you had vendors coming out of just about every piece of the woodwork. You had folks that had been data
Yeah.
management platforms before. You had folks that had been data aggregators or compilers. You had folks that came out of the campaign management type of architecture. And so they all brought a little bit different type of flavor to the table. And what ended up happening is the market hadn't solidified until
Yeah.
relatively recently to figure out what's the core of a CDP. So a lot of these different organizations would offer all these different things. They'd like an organization that was really focused on data all of a sudden would offer like decision making capabilities or AI capabilities that were probably a little bit out of their swim lane, but they
Yeah.
offered them anyway because it was kind of what the market was offering. And so a lot of our clients at Pega got a little bit frustrated because they felt like they'd been oversold, is probably the way. But the core of what CDPs do really well, which is collecting and curating that data and identifying, they do that great. It's when they get out of that swim lane, I think that customers tend to get frustrated. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what is the solution?
Well, I'd say this. If you're in an organization, what we tell people is that data, like what you get from a CDP, as much of that as you can get, is a good thing. Any insight that I
Right.
can get about Shelly Kramer or Matt Nolan, that's what I need, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily matter where it comes from as long as I can curate it, get it consistently. So I think the idea is that when you take that data that you get from a CDP or from any kind of signal provider or data provider like that,
Yeah.
you've got to combine it with everything else that you know about a customer, right? Anything else that you know about somebody, all the
Right.
context about them. And there's a lot of that, like their historical, what they've purchased, what they
Right.
look at, what they care about. You need to be able to combine that and then make a decision kind of in the moment, if you will. Like with the CDP, they'll give you the insights, but then you have to turn that, you have to activate it, right? And turn it
Right.
into something really valuable. And that's where a decisioning type of capability, where you really look through and say, what's the best thing to say to Shelly Kramer right now based on what I know about it? That's where it really comes in, I think. So
Right.
you got to look at it as the CDP is a great source of fuel. It's a great source of information, but then you got to put that to work. I
Right.
think that's the key to it.
Well, and I think that from a customer standpoint, I know that this has happened to all of us. The not a single human being gets up in the morning and says, I can't wait to call customer service about this problem that I have. No,
Most
none of
people
us.
would rather be struck by lightning. I think than actually
7 times,
customer service. Yeah,
okay?
agreed.
Or I could be pecked to death by your 7 parakeets. Now that I brought up the word seven,
100%.
we didn't talk about parakeet row, parakeet alley, but
Just for reference, we do
Matt
have
and
an awful lot of parakeets in my house. Yes, we do.
but the reality of it is, it's an onerous thing to have to do. We all dread it. And I would say that it's fair to state that in more instances than not, those experiences suck.
Yeah, they're
You
awful.
know, I mean, you call, you're passed off from person to person, you have to tell your story 17 different times. And the whole time you're doing it, if you're like me, a tech nerd, you're thinking, not only has there got to be a better way, I'm thinking, I know there's a better way. You just don't care enough about me as
That's
a
what
customer, and you don't care enough about your employees who are taking care of me when I'm at my most cranky to get these technology solutions in place, because it doesn't have to be this way, right?
it
Those
really doesn't.
engagements, it doesn't. And
And there
so
are
if
organizations that do that kind of thing. Really, there's some really good examples of organizations that are getting ahead of those problems really
yeah,
well. You wonder why everybody just doesn't do it, you know?
yeah. No, and it's like there's nothing better than when I call and I say, "Hey Matt, this is Shelly Kramer. Here's my issue today. I'm trying to figure it out. I can't." And you can go, "Oh, Shelly, you have the XYZ and here's what's happening." And oh my gosh, and you know what? I think this is the solution. Let's try this. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Like when you have every bit of information at your fingertips as quickly as you make contact with me as a call center agent, and we can have this amazing experience, it just it fuels everything. It makes me like the company that I've done business with. It makes me feel like you care about me. It makes me loyal to
I
this
agree with you there.
organization. By the way, it also keeps employees in their jobs rather than, I mean, I just sometimes can't imagine how difficult it must be to be in the business of customer service, right? Because every day you're solving problems, and most of the interactions that you have are not with people who are having their best day.
I 100%, and I'll give you a couple of examples because I know where you're saying and what you were
Yeah.
like in those cases where you're calling into a call center. That's places where they've actually let that go too far, right?
Yeah.
If you're having a problem, most of the time or a lot of the time, you can get ahead of that type of thing before it ever goes nuclear, if you will. Good
Right.
example. There's an organization. Actually, Achmea Insurance in the Netherlands. They do a couple of interesting things. They actually have invested in CDPs to give them some insight about what people are going through.
Yeah.
So based on what like Shelly Kramer's looking at on the website, what you're searching for, they can take that information, they can consume it in real time, and then use it to predict what problem you're having.
Right.
So what they might actually do is if you're looking to say you're frustrated with your policy and you're looking to a trade, instead of forcing you to try to figure out how to do that, what they'll do is proactively, as you're doing it on the web, they'll message you and say, "Hey, are you looking to cancel?" Right? And if
Yeah.
you're if you're a certain type of customer, you want to do it, like they'll actually make that simple for you, either by
Right.
routing you directly to a rep that knows what you're doing, or they'll actually let you do it digitally, or
Right.
they will, or if you're in the case where you're a great customer and they figure, we can really help this person, they'll actually arm the rep that they send you to with information to get, to help you solve the problem that you're
Right.
having right there in the,
Right.
and like organizations like HSBC Bank in a lot of particular cases, they will try to they'll do the same thing, take CDP insights, like data about what you're looking at, what you're seeing,
Right.
and use that to ultimately get you into the right journey, get you talking about the right things, like
Yeah.
reach out to you proactively. That's where if you can get ahead of somebody's problem and not
Right.
force them to call into the call center, I think you're probably doing everybody
Oh,
a
absolutely. Absolutely. And the other part of it too, I try to think of it not only in terms of solving problems, it's that, a lot of times I've purchased this and I've purchased this, but I don't even know that this over here exists. And so when I have the opportunity to have an engagement, whether it's through chat, digital experience, or whether I'm talking with an agent, and it's like, okay, Shelly, here's the deal. Not really trying to sell you anything, but of course I am. Um, you know, I noticed that you have these two pieces of our whatever, whatever.
portfolio. Yeah.
maybe at some point you might want to take a look at this. This could be, enhance this experience,
And
whatever,
that's the
whatever.
best
But
experience, right? Like, in a lot of ways, when they can recommend something to you that actually makes more financial sense to you or more
yeah,
sense from a usability perspective and get ahead of that and make it feel like a very natural part of the
yeah,
conversation. And the worst parts, Shelly, to me, is feeling sold to, right? Is feeling like somebody's trying to sell me something. Like, that's why I don't want to call into a call center.
I
Like,
don't either.
it's that feeling that I want to go through. It's like calling my mother and she's going to explain to me these 700 things that I don't want to know about what dad ate for dinner. Like, it's like that, right? Like, but if I
Right.
can get away from that experience and make it really simple, that's when it becomes a much more like that's to me is the kind of thing that builds loyalty. You're simple to
Well,
do business with.
yeah, and it's a thing. I think of it as kind of a recommendation engine, right? Because I have come to trust Netflix and I've come to trust Amazon in ways that they know what I'm consuming, whether it's streaming content, whether it's goods and whatever. You know what I'm saying? So their recommendation engines are very sophisticated. And so they can serve up for me, a lot of it as a consumer is we don't know what we don't know. I don't know
Sure.
that, like I said, I may have two pieces of equipment, but I didn't even know this other one existed, or maybe this is upgraded, or maybe this is whatever. And so I, like you, I don't always like to be sold to, but I also really love knowing about things that I didn't know existed or that can enhance my experience or that are upgraded or something
Things
that
that
I'm
I might not
entitled
have
to,
bargained for. Yeah.
that I didn't know about. So I think there's just so many beyond just a CDP, it can fuel so many things, you
I
know?
I I 100% agree. It can fuel the whole rest of the experience, whether it's an offer or it's something simpler like solving a business problem. Like,
Right.
NatWest is actually a really good example. It used to be Royal Bank of Scotland. What they used to do, and they still do this in large part, is you say Shelly buys a ticket to go to go to a foreign country, right? They would actually see that because you buy it on your NatWest card. They would message you proactively because what they'll tell you is like, look, if you really do buy that ticket, when you get to that country, your credit card's not going to work because you're going to have to get it approved for foreign travel, right?
Right.
So they proactively reach out to you and tell you about that. And they were really afraid that customers would feel like they were being spied on or something. But here's the thing: if you can get somebody around a painful experience and you can
Yeah.
provide, people love that, and they love that. Like their NPS scores went through the roof because people like you're
You're taking
solving,
care of me.
yeah, you're taking care of me, and
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to in large.
Well, and there's, I mean, I travel a lot. There's really nothing worse than being in another country and, not even thinking about it and trying to use a credit card
Not
and not
having
having it
access
work.
to
So,
funds,
so
yeah,
it's like you're taking care of me. You're proactively taking care of me. You care about me and the experiences I have. All of those messages come through when you just use technology and the data insights that you can get from your CDP to integrate that into every aspect of the customer journey. It's a beautiful
totally
thing.
agree. I totally agree. There's not a lot of other ways for an organization to make somebody feel loved, right? But that's
Yeah,
one of them, right?
yeah,
I would say that.
it is absolutely. So this week, Pega released customer data connectors. Give us a little overview of this, if you would. I can't wait to have. I don't know anything about it. I can't
Sure.
wait to learn more.
All right. Well, think about it this way. Like we said, a lot of our